in this space of now, it's not necessary to have fear. In this place of now, we can rest. And certainly there'll be views and there'll be opinions. They're part of being human and having a mind. But you don't have to be so attached or take it so real or seriously, which is what the Buddha discovered. He had a much better time than most people. He didn't suffer because greed or hatred or fear or delusion were not things that he was caught in anymore. And we don't have to suffer in that way either. We can learn this inner art.
Who would you be if you dropped your opinions, views, and identity? Contemplates Jack Kornfield in this episode 239 of Heart Wisdom, Heart as Big as the Sky. This continues last week's talk, all about overcoming views and opinions, this time laying out tactical techniques for overcoming aversion, fear, and judgment by getting out of the rational mind and bringing it into the heart. So over the years, I've listened to quite a bit of Jack Kornfield, and something new jumped out at me in this episode that I'd never heard him say before, and it's a sentiment I love. He shared, "Buddha had a better time. He had a better time than most. He figured it out. Where we were all caught, he saw a way through. And that's the path we're all on right now. And I'm honored to be here with you all." So before setting you Dharma birds free to the big sky mind of Jack Kornfield, I just have a couple bits of housekeeping. This June starts the cohort for Jack Kornfield's Dynamic Art of Guided Meditation Masterclass. This is a wonderful course that Jack put together at Spirit Rock, teaching practitioners and other teachers, some of which you'll recognize in the videos like Wes Nisker, his powerful, transformative art of guided meditation, something that I've experienced firsthand. The 2 live question and answer sessions take place on June 13th and June 19th, but the main modules of the course, which are beautiful and pro-shot, are up on jackkornfield.com, ready for you to dive in. And then on June 22nd, we have a rather monumental event. Jack will be back at Spirit Rock teaching a day-long retreat titled The Awakened Heart, Mindfulness and Compassion Practices for Living a Wise and Free Life. This day-long retreat will take place both online and on land at Spirit Rock, where there are a limited number of slots. And I guess this is a good time to plug the Jack Kornfield newsletter, because anyone signed up for his email teachings got notified in the events and courses box about this event before anyone else. You can sign up for Jack's email teachings at jackkornfield.com/newsletter, and all of the courses and the retreats I was speaking of can be found in the courses and event sections. So as always, thank you for spelunking the depths of wisdom with Jack Kornfield. May you enjoy this episode, and may your heart be as big as the sky. Namaste.
Then what's another step one can do in becoming aware of these forces, of our views or our fears or whatever? This is really a key step in spiritual practice, and that is to bring your heart to it and not your mind. Not your rational mind especially. Spare yourself. To take this state, this view that you're attached to, or this fear, or this prejudice, or this jealousy, or whatever it is that you've noticed, and touch it with compassion and mercy and kindness. Notice if there's aversion to it. Very often, these are the things that we hate in ourselves. and bring it into your heart. Instead of the aversion, notice that, name the aversion. Hating, I don't like this. And then see, can you touch this with your heart? A way to do it that's useful when you're working with some difficult state inside is to see it as a child. When you face your anger, see it as an angry child. When you face your hunger and your addiction, see it as a starving child. When you face your sleepiness and your delusion, see it as a deluded, mixed up child. When you face your fear, see it as a terrified child. Feel the child. Feel it in your body so that you relate to it not from how you should be or from the mind, but from some much deeper place in your heart that can understand and hold the child that is frightened, or the child that is hungry, or the child that's having a tantrum. I mean, what do you do when a child is having a hard time? You pick the kid up generally, put it in your lap, stroke it a little bit, say, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. I know you're hungry or frightened or angry. So you recognize it, you give it an honest name, and then you put it on your lap and you bring it into your heart. And you know what? That helps with aversion. You have to do it over and over again. It's not like you do it once and then the kid is okay. Anybody ever raise a child? It doesn't work that way. It's like every morning over again. So that helps with the aversion. Then what can you do? You can then, when you're friendly with it, when you're kinder with it, you can see the pattern. See how it's just comprised of views. Your anger just comes out of your opinions. Your greed and addiction just comes out of your fear. It comes out of the same place, really. And see it. It's really quite ephemeral. It changes. It has no truth to it. No matter whether it's the Hatfields and the McCoys and they go on for 4 generations, sooner or later it's going to end. And then somebody will read about it in the history books and say, that was a pretty silly one, wasn't it? They spent 100 years shooting at each other over what? So it's looking clearly at the karma of this pattern, seeing its consequences, seeing whether it's actually of any value to you. This is called clear comprehension, this part of mindfulness. It's noticing what's true about what you see. Then what to do? You recognize it and name it and bring it into your heart and see what its value. Does it have value to you? Then, and this is a really useful step in paying attention, feel the pain and the separation that arises from identifying with it. With no judgment, don't say you should or shouldn't be involved in it. I mean, here you are, you've asked it out on a date, and you're already gone out to dinner with it or taken it to the movies or wherever you've gone with it or to some meeting. So you're there. It's not, you don't just kind of open the door and kick it out. But you look at, now, am I having a good time on this date? You look at this inner experience and say, is there pain with this? Is there separation? How much pain? See what it's like when it's there. And as you listen to this talk, you might take an example in yourself, if you haven't done that, of some view or attachment or fear or greed or anger that you have. Recognize it, name it. See if you can bring it into your heart as a child, as an angry or frightened child. Look at it clearly, and then see whether it's painful to hold it. Does holding help you? Is that useful? What is it like when it's there? And then what's it like when it ends? Because all these states will go away at some point for a while. What's it like when it's not present? Which is a better way for you to relate? And then here's a difficult question. Who would I be without it? If it weren't here, If I've made some identity based on this, who would I be if I let go of this view or this opinion or this prejudice or this attachment? And a lot of times people, wait a second, that would be really hard. I don't even know who I'd be, which is actually a very spiritual state, but a bit uncomfortable initially. Who would you be without it? Begin to allow yourself to feel the space of non-identity, of not taking that as yourself, because it isn't yourself. And you can find some greater identity of the sense of space or emptiness, the identity of the heart. Again, from Zen master Takuan. Try not to locate the heart anywhere, but let it fill up the whole body. Let it flow through the totality of your being. When this happens, you use the hands where they are needed, you use the legs or the eyes where they're needed, and no time or energy will go to waste. See if you can let your heart be as big as your whole experience, like the sky. And see if there's some other identity beside I want and I like and I dislike and I hate and I believe this and that and that. Because you have some deeper and bigger identity. Much greater than that. So this is feel the pain and separation that it causes and see who you might be if you let go of it. And that leads to the next step. These can all happen at once. They're different ways of talking about mindfulness. So you don't have to remember the whole list. You can just pick out one piece if you like. Practice the art of letting go. Here's Yogi Berra again. Find you here. One of his baseball players said, I'm in a rut. I can't break myself of the habit of swinging up at the ball. Yogi Berra said, then swing down. That simple. We actually can do that. If we're willing to, often we can do that. Maybe not always. If there's some deep grief or some very profound addiction and fear, it takes its time and it needs some respect in that process. But we have this possibility of letting go, and it's the art of spiritual life. What it is really a shift of identity. It's not so much that you let go because this is bad and you shouldn't have that and you're trying to make yourself a perfect person, but because you sense the pain in some kinds of holding on, in the attachment. And so in a way, it's also called letting be. It's just letting it come and go without being engaged in it, not feeding it, not taking it out on a date or out for dinner or lunch or wherever. Come on, let's go to a wonderful restaurant and indulge ourselves. Saying, no, thank you. The last date wasn't very much fun. It's nice to see you. I'll talk to you later. Learning the art, the inner art of seeing what causes us pain and just not following it. It will arise. It will test you 20, 30, 50, 100 times. That's okay. That's its job. It's just doing its job. Do you remember me? Oh, yeah, thanks. Never mind. It's just like your kids. And then finally, learning to live in the reality of the present, of the now. This place which is eternal, opening to this place without so much attachment to our views, to who we're supposed to be, to where we're going. It doesn't mean you can't act in creative ways and serve the earth and care for it. But you can do it from here rather than always clinging at something that's not present. It means, as I've talked about in other evenings, somehow learning to swim, learning to let go and live more in a mode of trust, of some inner peace, rather than trying to control our life in the world so much. And then letting our actions come in the moment out of our heart, out of what we care about, rather than out of our attachments. Hey, Yogi Berra, what time is it? Yogi Berra, you mean now? This is Arthur Miller. The word now is like a bomb thrown through the window, and it keeps ticking. It is. This now, this sense of now is incredibly powerful. Because all the stories and all the views and all the ways that we get caught up and all the fear that underlies it is about something that's not here. It's about something that we anticipate. Fear is always about the future. Did you know that? Fear is never about what's here. We may like or dislike, or it may be painful or pleasant, it may be hot or cold. That's just duality kind of doing its dance. Fear is about what hasn't come yet. In the now, things are just as they are. And this is the place of rest. If you're hiking in the Sierras and you see a big bear, you get afraid, right? The fear isn't of seeing the bear down the trail. The fear is what the bear's going to do to you. Then the bear comes toward you and it catches you. And then again, you're terrified. It's not that the bear has caught you that's so fearful, but what it's going to do next, right? Then it bites you. That hurts a lot. It's really painful. You hate it. It's very unpleasant. But you're not afraid of that. You're afraid, where's it going to bite next? Then it bites you a few more times and you realize, this is it, I'm a goner. Then you're not afraid of what it's going to do next. Then you're afraid of what's going to happen next when you die. Can you hear that? The fear is always not what's here, but something ahead. In this space of now, it's not necessary to have fear. In this place of now, we can rest. And certainly there'll be views and there'll be opinions. They're part of being human and having a mind. But you don't have to be so attached or take it so real or seriously, which is what the Buddha discovered. He had a much better time than most people. He didn't suffer because greed or hatred or fear or delusion were not things that he was caught in anymore. And we don't have to suffer in that way either. We can learn this inner art of paying attention, of naming, recognizing, bringing our heart to that part of ourselves, like the child that it is, feeling the pain of that separation or that attachment, and learning the art of letting go, discovering that there is some other identity that is truer and deeper and more silent, discovering the wisdom of insecurity, the place the Buddha called the timeless, the deathless, the place of our freedom. And it's no place else than in ourselves, in this moment. This is from Kabir. I said to this wanting creature inside me, what is this river you want to cross? You always want to be somewhere else. But there are no travelers on the river road, and no road. There is no body, and no mind. Do you believe there is some place that will make the soul less thirsty? In that great absence you will find nothing. Be strong then and enter into your own body. There you have a solid place for your feet. Think about it carefully. Don't go off somewhere else. Don't try to be someone else. Kabir says this, just throw away all thoughts of imaginary things and stand firm in that which you are. Can we find that place in ourselves? And the path of spiritual practice is to discover that through our sitting, through the other practices that we might do, through silence in our life, but mostly through our attention. And then to have that be the ground from which we live, even if the kids come and give us a difficult time some days. As they do, that's all right. But to relate to them from that place rather than the opposite, rather than making our views and our greed and our fear actually our identity. Remember that letter? I guess I'll read this to end, and then we'll take a few questions. That letter I started a couple of weeks ago, from the letter to the insurance company. In response to your request for additional information in block number 3 of the accident reporting form, I put poor planning as the cause of my accident. You said in your letter I should explain more fully. I trust the following details will be sufficient. I'm a bricklayer by trade. On the day of the accident, I was working alone on the roof of a new 6-story building. When I completed my work, I discovered I had 500 pounds of brick left. Rather than carry them down by hand, I decided to lower them in a barrel attached to the side of the building. Securing the rope at ground level, I went up to the roof, swung the barrel out, and loaded the brick into it. Then I went back to the ground and untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure a slow descent of the 500 pounds of bricks. You will note in block number 11 of the accident reporting form that I weigh 135 pounds. Due to my surprise of being jerked off the ground so suddenly, I lost my presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded at a rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explained the fractured skull. Slowing slightly, I continued my ascent, stopping when the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep in the pulley. Fortunately, by this time I had regained my presence of mind and was able to hold tightly to the rope in spite of my pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground and the bottom fell out of the barrel. Devoid of the weight of bricks, the barrel now weighed approximately 50 pounds. I refer you again to my weight in block number 11. As you might imagine, I began a rapid descent down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I again met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the fractured ankle. The encounter with the barrel slowed me enough to lessen my injuries when I fell onto the bricks. Fortunately, only my toe was cracked. I am sorry to report, however, that as I lay there on the bricks in pain, unable to stand and watching the empty barrel 6 stories above me, I again lost my presence of mind. I let go of the rope. This is entitled On Knowing When to Let Go. I'm sorry about that, Ramdas, but what can you do? He's right, actually. Putting that laughter aside, there's something really important that you can consider in your practice about views and about attachments and about fear. And it's not something that you come and you sit once a week or you have a morning sitting practice and that's where it gets worked out. But it's in the repetitive attention to the situations of our life where we begin to learn this dance of what it is that creates sorrow and separation in our lives and the war and poverty and prejudice that creates the suffering worldwide. And what it means to honor that, to name it, to find a compassion with it, and to free ourselves through an understanding. And that's the invitation of spiritual practice. You might reflect on yourself, or what are the pieces that it's finally time to look at and work with? The ones that you've been identified with long enough and been in pain about long enough. We have a few minutes for questions, if anyone does, or thoughts, please.
I feel all right about intuition coming up as kind of like a theme, but imagination is okay if I'm wanting that to happen. But since I started painting more, my imagination is kind of coming out all the time while I'm walking down the street. I'll see a manhole cover, and then I'll imagine all these things coming out of the manhole cover and making it and so on, and that really bothers me. I feel like it's going to take over my life. It doesn't take over my life, but
It doesn't.
no. But I feel like it isn't really appropriate. That it doesn't. I'm bothered by it. I feel like it's extra. That I don't need it. That
The question, she says, is that she's begun a process of painting lately. She has a pretty vivid imagination as she paints, and it brings out what's inside her in an interior way to outside. Then, as that process gets activated, and this can happen in meditation as well, then she starts to have a rich imagination elsewhere, and she'll look around and a tree will turn into other forms, or a car or a manhole cover will have other forms. And she said it's a little scary, I think, in part, as if that might take over her life. It doesn't really do it, but she doesn't like it so much, and she wishes it would go away. How many people here have things that come in your mind that you wish would go away? Don't raise your hand, never mind. Sometimes it's sights, sometimes it's sounds, sometimes it's feelings, sometimes it's thoughts, sometimes it will be judgments. Have you noticed if you're judging a lot and you wish it to go away, what happens? Anybody notice? It gets more. In fact, the wanting it to go away is what? It's just another judgment. The resistance to things generally makes them worse. If those images come and you could say, there's an image, this tree turned into a snake, and then that turned into a beautiful golden scepter, and then that turned into whatever, and you notice that, and it's just as if you were to say the sky is blue, and there are images that arise. If you could say it like the sky is blue, it would be quite fine. The difficulty for us, and your question is a really useful one, isn't so much the experiences that we have. Some are pleasant and some are painful, and there's no way around that. But it lies in the relationship that we take to them. I'll bet there are a lot of people in this room who would trade with you, who would like a vivid imagination and lots of pictures. It's amazing, but it's true. But anyway, they're yours. There's a playful kid in there. Enjoy her. Other questions, please?
this was very appropriate talking today. In that I've been watching what's going on in Marin and watching the land being destroyed and feeling great, great sorrow. And I think it was very appropriate for you to, for me to go inside and to see what that's touching off on me. At the same time, I feel like I have some social responsibility. And if I don't have any views, how do I know when to act and what to do? How to approach that? I've had to be very political in the past about that because I don't like the
fight.
reality of it.
Yeah.
And I would like to enter it again, but I don't want to enter it in that way. But yet I feel like I have to be.
It's a beautiful question. This woman says that she's been involved in political fights in the past for good causes, and she dropped out because she didn't like the struggle and the fight of it. At the same time, she looks around at the use and the lack of care for the environment. And right here in Marin County, what's happening to the land as it's being developed or abused, and probably more broadly, globally. And how does that relate to what I spoke about tonight about views? Is that the gist of it? You will have views. It's fine to have views. The place that we get in trouble is when we create an identity, attachment, and then do battle, because those views make up what's right and what's wrong and who our self is. So that if you carry those views into battle, what you find is you create conflict wherever you go. And so that you can have a revolution and it topples the government, and then those revolutionaries fight the new revolutionaries come up, and there's no end to it. There is, as I'm sure you are aware, another way. And really what I hear your question about is, how do I access that other way? You read about it in Gandhi, or you look at Martin Luther King, or you look at whoever inspires you, people who really care to the bottom of every cell of their being about life and about one another, but yet don't do it from a place of fight. What is that other place? What is the source of that strength? And I don't want to give you a simple answer, because it's not a question that a few sentences could answer. But there is a place within us of wholeness, of well-being, of a kind of inner strength, the strength of the heart, that's greater than all those sorrows and those struggles, that's not afraid of the pain, that's not even caught up, not even afraid that maybe the earth will go down in flames. I mean, there is that fear, but there's some place that touches something greater, which is the force that created all of this. And if we can find that, touch that place of fearlessness in ourselves, or of peacefulness, or of wholeness, then we can go and really work and care for the earth, the rainforest, the land, not out of a place of aggression, but out of a place of very deep commitment, because we are connected with that, because it's ourself, as if it were our own body. And in one way, the practice of meditation is to discover that place in yourself, that place of both emptiness, of selflessness, and therefore of connectedness. Being nothing, I am everything. All I could say then is that that's your work, and it's wonderful work. Were you going to say something more? There's this passage I read from Martin Luther King. I've read it a lot of times, but it always inspires me, so I'll read it once more. In the difficulty of the marches, he said, "We will match your capacity to inflict suffering with our capacity to endure suffering. We will meet your physical force with soul force. We will not hate you, but we cannot in all good conscience obey your unjust laws. But we will soon wear you down by our capacity to suffer. And in winning our freedom, we will so appeal to your heart and conscience that we will win your freedom in the process." That's a place of action that's not one of attachment to opinion, but to some connection to some deeper truth. That's extraordinary. And we have that.
But Jack, what if you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have a conscience? If you're dealing with somebody who's a sociopath?
What if you're dealing with people without conscience, or who's a sociopath, or a system that's that way? I don't know the answer to that. I can't tell you, quite honestly. There are some people, like Gandhi, who would just give their lives at that moment and say, these principles and this which I value is greater than whether I live or die. And be a martyr in some sense, or live from those principles. There are others who might find some other way to work with it. I don't have a simple answer. And when you find yourself in that situation, I wish you luck, or if I do, I wish you well. But I know that for the most part in our lives, we don't have to work from a polarized place. And for the most part on this earth, although there may be circumstances that are incredibly difficult, and I don't know how you should deal with them, that if we want to create peace, or if we want to live freely, free from greed, hatred, and delusion, the place to start is in ourselves. And that's the best that I can say for an answer, and wish you well in those times.